Hi Greg, it's Shannon Fisher. Today I'm going to be talking all about my inquiry project, and I'd just like to thank you for allowing me to use this platform to share my findings for my inquiry project. And so yeah, I've created a PowerPoint for my inquiry project, and you can follow along with this when you're watching this video. So yeah, I'm going to get started. So originally my inquiry project prior to entering the classroom full-time had a lot to do with the actual physical arrangement of the class. When I first walked in, like during observation days, it was just like set up in rows. Like students were in individual desks, all set up in rows facing one blackboard. And that really shocked me, as that's like something that we don't really practice anymore, or that is seen as not an environment that allows for student collaboration. So I really wanted to narrow in on how this environment was affecting student collaboration in the classroom and just student learning in general. As I was really surprised to see that my students were in rows. But once commencing, I just found out that my teacher had just arranged the desks the night before I started my full-time practicum. And so therefore, I didn't think that my inquiry project would be completely feasible, as I had not done enough documentation on the actual classroom environment when they were in rows, and now that they were in this U-shaped row configuration that was a bit different, I didn't think that I would be able to produce a well-rounded enough inquiry project, and that I could have enough insight as a result. And also my associate teacher, once she had changed that, she's like, I'm not really willing to rearrange it again, if you were wanting to do that, so I think you should scrap that idea. I'm like, okay, no problem. So in my first couple of days, I already started noticing other things that I wanted to inquire about, and how things that I could change in my practice potentially to improve and monitor. So when I started teaching full-time, my associate teacher was pretty critical about my lesson plans, my Brock lesson plans thing, and she mentioned that a lot of that is because all of the lesson plans we have created up until this point have not been for real students and not a real classroom in a real school. So they were not necessarily always attainable or feasible or appropriate. And so she just wished that I was even more detailed about how exactly I was going to structure my lesson from start to finish, and all of the questions I was going to ask. So that was interesting for me. But a lot of the comments I was receiving from her is that she was questioning my assessment tool, and she would often ask if I could defend a student's grade using the rubric or checkbook that I had created. She would often ask me to think about what am I looking for? What are the look-fors in this assessment, and how does that relate to the curriculum, and how can I appropriately assess students using this checkbook? So that really got me thinking, and I immediately decided that, okay, I needed to try a bunch of different methods and see what was working for me, and I brought that all the way back to the success criteria in my lessons, and I wanted to make sure that the success criteria again were SMART goals, that they were attainable, that they were realistic, and that they were appropriate measures of what the students were doing, and that I could measure appropriately to get the same result every time. So with assessment, every time I looked at that student's work, I would give it the same grade. And that's consistency, and that's what you want. It's not just how I was feeling at that time, they get a C. So I thought that was really important, and that really helped me to understand the importance of assessment. So as I started tweaking my assessment tools and my checkbooks for my assignments or my activities, I would constantly be in consultation with my associate teacher, and I would ask her, oh, like, what do you think of this assessment tool? If you were to mark this students, what would you, with this check brick, do you think it's an accurate depiction of the curriculum expectations as well as the student work? So as I continued and started tweaking them, I was documenting this through my lesson plans. I was always embedding my assessment tool to ensure that I could see what tweaks I had made. And so some challenges that I was faced when I was making these revisions, like 2 questions I would ask myself constantly were like, how am I ensuring this assessment tool and this assessment in general is accurately depicting like the expectations that are outlined in the curriculum, as well as the student performance? Like, is it appropriate for the grade level that I'm teaching? And are these expectations really being assessed? Or is this assessment truly getting the information I need to assess this curriculum expectation? So I had to constantly be asking myself those questions. Then the other question that I would ask is like, could I write a report card comment if all I had in front of me was the check brick and the grade? Like, because to say the student work's already gone home, could I write a report card comment? And that was really interesting. That really shifted my mind of like, why am I actually creating these check bricks for each student with these comments? So I found that as time went on and I made multiple revisions and I was in consultation with my associate teacher, I found that I got like a lot more familiar with assessment in general, and it was easier to come up with success criteria that was attainable and measurable because I got into this habit of mind of asking myself, does this align with the curriculum expectations? Can I defend this grade if the principal walked in and says, why does this student deserve a 2? Or if the parent walked in? And that really shifted my whole mind about like assessment in general. So some of the assessment, like the insight I found was that the true purpose of assessment is to ensure that we are accurately measuring students up to the curriculum expectations at their grade level, including if they're differentiated or whatnot, like if they are modified rather, sorry. And it's really a huge responsibility for a teacher to ensure that this assessment is like authentic, that it is appropriate measurement for the curriculum expectations that you're trying to get out of this assessment. And another point I want to make is that it was every time I was to mark something that I would get the same result, that I was consistent, and that I was fair, and it was measurable in a way that was very consistent across the board. And I really did gain a ton of insight from this inquiry around assessment, because we really didn't have true authentic experience ourselves when it came to assessing students. And that's super important, and I'm so grateful for this inquiry project and how I monitored my progress. And I feel very comfortable with creating check bricks that will reflect a student's performance now, and I feel very comfortable to write a report card comment because I know through my check bricks, one thing I added, like after I had been tweaking it for a bit, is that I needed a really true like comment section in my thing, so I could include things like John's, like for example, I did a board game, so I could write things like John's board game called Pancake Frenzy, blah 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 blah, so that when it comes down to report card comments, I could provide like super personal but appropriate comments that reflected his true assessment. And I think that's super important, and it's really aligned with the growing success criteria. We want to be personal in our report card comments, but also be super consistent and describe what exactly that student achieved. So for example, if I was talking about this board game, I could say like John's Pancake Frenzy project or board game had excellent was able to provide the detail necessary in expository writing at all times. So I don't think I mentioned it, but in my checkbooks I always measured between all, some, and none, as those are measurable. I can say, okay, they have, like, when I'm measuring if they revise their work, they revise all, some, or none. Do they have enough details? They have 3 details. They have all 3, some, or none. So then it's super easy for when I'm creating like these report card comments, that I'm reporting on exactly what they have done. They included all 3 details, some of the 3 details, etc. So yeah, I learned a lot about assessment, and I'm really grateful for this project. And yeah, I'm really happy that I could share with you my insights in this way. So thanks for listening.